Court was a revolving door of classrooms and zip codes. According to major sports media reports, by the time his high school years were winding down in the mid-'80s, Lloyd had attended 5 different high schools across 3 different states. It was a shell game played by coaches and handlers who saw a golden ticket in his right hand, but ignored the fact that the young man was drowning in a world he couldn't read or understand. Reporters noted at the time that while his basketball IQ was off the charts, his life was being managed by people who were far more concerned with his points per game than his personal future. The hype was a heavy cloak to wear for a teenager from Queens who was still trying to find his footing. Every time he stepped onto the court, he was playing for his life, his family, and the expectations of an entire city that hadn't seen a talent like this since Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The talent was undeniable, but the foundation was made of sand. Even as the biggest programs in the country started knocking on his door, there was a sense that something was bound to give. While the streets anointed him the heir to the throne, a fierce college recruiting war was about to expose the fatal cracks in his foundation. In the late 80s, there was no program in college basketball more polarizing or more exciting than the UNLV Runnin' Rebels. At the center of it all was Jerry Tarkanian, a man they called Tark the Shark, who had a reputation for taking in the kids other coaches wouldn't touch. Tarkanian didn't just want Lloyd Daniels. He felt he needed him to complete his masterpiece in Las Vegas. According to public documents, in the spring of 1986, Tarkanian took the extraordinary and controversial step of becoming Lloyd's legal guardian. It was a move that blurred the lines between coach and father, designed to stabilize a young man who had never known a steady hand. To get Lloyd ready for the bright lights of the NCAA, the plan was to tuck him away at Mount San Antonio College in California, a junior college where he could work on his academics away from the distractions of the city. It was supposed to be a sanctuary, but the truth was much harder to hide. In television reports from late 1986, it was revealed that testing showed Lloyd was reading at a mere 3rd grade level. It was a staggering statistic that laid bare the systemic failure of every adult who had passed him along just to keep him on a roster. Despite this, the basketball world kept spinning, and the pressure in Las Vegas was reaching a fever pitch as fans waited for the savior to arrive. Behind the scenes, the environment was less like a college campus and more like a high-stakes gamble. Lloyd was a young man with the keys to a kingdom he didn't know how to rule, surrounded by the temptations of a city that never sleeps. Tarkanian was convinced he could protect him, but even a legal guardianship couldn't stop the momentum of the lifestyle Lloyd had been running toward for years. The stage was perfectly set for a national championship run, but on a freezing night just days before his debut, the entire Las Vegas blueprint was suddenly shattered. The end of the dream didn't happen on a basketball court. It happened in a dusty parking lot in North Las Vegas. On February 9, 1987, the news broke like a thunderclap across the sports world. According to court records, Lloyd Daniels had been arrested in an undercover police sting operation. He wasn't caught in a high-speed chase or a violent brawl. He was caught trying to navigate a destructive dependency that had quietly taken hold of his life. Police reports at the time documented that he was apprehended while attempting to purchase $30 worth of crack cocaine from an undercover officer. The fallout was instantaneous and merciless. Television coverage at the time focused on the image of the Golden Boy in handcuffs, a sight that sent shockwaves through the university administration. Within hours, the school's president made it clear that Lloyd's time as a rebel was over before he ever suited up for a single game. Tarkanian, the man who had fought so hard to be his guardian, was forced by the university to publicly sever all ties. In a heartbreaking press conference, the coach had to watch his master plan evaporate into thin air. Why did it have to happen then, just as he was on the verge of the life he'd always wanted? Suddenly, the #1 recruit in the country was a persona non grata. His scholarship was revoked, his legal guardian was gone, and the NBA scouts who once salivated at his potential started crossing his name off their lists. He was 20 years old, effectively illiterate, and facing the harsh reality of the legal system without a cent to his name. Stripped of his scholarship and his surrogate father, Swee Pea was suddenly a phenom with no team, no safety net, and a growing, dangerous dependency. When the lights of Las Vegas went out, Lloyd Daniels found himself wandering through a basketball wilderness that would have broken a lesser man. The elite colleges were gone, and the NBA wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole. He was forced into the Continental Basketball Association, or the CBA, a league full of hungry guys playing in cold gyms for a few $100s a week. He landed with the Topeka Sizzlers, but the Lloyd who showed up wasn't the lightning-quick kid from the New York playgrounds. According to Basketball Archives, during that 1988 season, his weight ballooned by nearly 30 pounds as he struggled to keep his personal demons at bay. Reporters noted at the time that the genius-level court vision was still there, but the body simply couldn't keep up with the mind. He was playing in a fog, trying to find his rhythm while dealing with a destructive dependency that followed him into every locker room. According to major sports media reports, management in Topeka eventually ran out of patience, dismissing him after only a handful of games because the discipline just wasn't there. It was a humbling fall for a man who had once been compared to Magic Johnson, now finding himself effectively blackballed from the game he loved. He spent the next few months drifting, making brief appearances in obscure leagues and trying to find a reason to stay clean. He was back in New York more often than not, hanging around the same old neighborhoods where his legend was born but where the temptations were the strongest. He was 21 years old and already looking like a what-if story in the making. His professional career was flatlining in those obscure gyms, but back home in Queens, a petty neighborhood dispute on a spring night was about to turn his life into a literal battle for survival. New York City in the late 80s was a place of high stakes and short tempers, especially in the neighborhoods where Lloyd spent his time. On May 11, 1989, the story of Swee Pea nearly ended on a sidewalk in Hollis. It wasn't a grand conspiracy or a major criminal enterprise that brought him down. It was something far more senseless. According to major sports media reports, Lloyd was shot 3 times during a confrontation over a drug debt that amounted to exactly $8. That was the price of a legend's life in the eyes of the man holding the chrome. Court records showed the raw brutality of the encounter, detailing how the bullets tore into his chest and shoulder. For a few days, the basketball world held its breath while the news reports trickled out of a Queens hospital. One of those bullets ended up permanently lodged in his body, a piece of lead shrapnel that the doctors decided was too dangerous to remove. Public records indicate that while he miraculously survived the surgery, the damage to his right shoulder, his shooting shoulder, was considered a career ender by almost every expert in the industry. He left that hospital a changed man, carrying the physical and emotional weight of that night in every movement. The headlines moved on to the next tragedy, and most people assumed Lloyd Daniels would just become another cautionary tale whispered about at Rucker Park. The recovery was slow, painful, and lonely, but something in him refused to let the story end on a sidewalk in Hollis. Lying in a hospital bed with shrapnel buried in his shooting shoulder, no one asked when he would play basketball again. They only wondered if he would survive the week. Most people with a bullet in their chest would be happy just to walk to the grocery store, but Lloyd Daniels was back in a gym before the scars had even fully healed. He had to reinvent himself entirely, learning how to shoot the ball with a hitch in his motion and a shoulder that didn't quite rotate the way it used to. He started the long, unglamorous grind through the world's minor leagues, proving he could stay sober and productive. According to archived international statistics, Lloyd traveled all the way to a league in New Zealand for the 1990 to 1991 season, where he absolutely dominated the competition by averaging over 30 points per game. In interviews, he spoke about the clarity he found while playing overseas, away from the noise and the ghosts of his past. He was finally treating the game like a job instead of a birthright. He returned to the States and joined the Global Basketball Association, or the GBA, a league that most fans have long since forgotten. But according to Basketball Archives, Lloyd was a revelation there, winning the league's Most Valuable Player award in 1992. He was proving to the scouts that while he might have lost a step of his old speed, his basketball IQ was still miles ahead of everyone else on the floor. The word started to spread through the scouting circles. Swee Pea was back, he was clean, and he was actually playing winning basketball. He had been through the fire and come out the other side with a different kind of focus. He was dominating gyms in front of a few hundred people, but halfway across the world, an old friend had just been handed the keys to an NBA franchise and was looking for a miracle of his own. That one phone call was about to change everything, leading to a contract offer from the San Antonio Spurs. It was the kind of phone call that shouldn't have happened in a million years. In the early 90s, Jerry Tarkanian had finally reached the mountaintop, being hired as the head coach of the San Antonio Spurs. But instead of playing it safe in the pros, Tark went right back to the one talent he couldn't forget. He called Lloyd Daniels and offered him a chance that almost no one in the NBA thought he deserved. According to NBA transaction archives, in the preseason of 1992, Lloyd Daniels officially signed a contract with the Spurs, completing a journey from the pavement of Queens to the hardwood of the NBA. Reporters noted at the time that the move was seen as a massive gamble, a charity case for a coach and a player who shared a history of trouble with the authorities. But when the lights went up at the Hemisphere Arena, Lloyd didn't look like a charity case. He looked like he belonged. He wasn't the high-flying kid anymore, but he was a technician, using his size to see over defenders and his changed shooting stroke to find the bottom of the net. According to official basketball reference archives, the man who was once left for dead on a sidewalk started 10 games during that rookie campaign, playing alongside legends like David Robinson. It was the ultimate feel-good story for a league that usually didn't do second chances, and the San Antonio crowd embraced him as a local hero. For a few months, it looked like the fairy tale was actually going to have a happy ending. He was 25 years old, finally collecting a real paycheck and proving that his genius hadn't been fully extinguished by the bullets or the years of neglect. But the honeymoon phase in Texas wouldn't even survive the winter, as the politics of the front office began to clash with Tarkanian's vision. Once the initial shock of Lloyd's arrival wore off, the real work of the NBA season set in. He was showing flashes of that old playground magic, threading passes through needles and hitting clutch shots that left veteran defenders shaking their heads. He was proving that the streetball legends weren't just tall tales told by old men on park benches, but while Lloyd was holding his own, the team around him was fractured. In a move that sent shockwaves through the league, Jerry Tarkanian was fired after exactly 20 games into the 1992-93 season, according to press conference transcripts. With his protector gone, many expected Lloyd to be the next one out the door. Instead, the Spurs hired John Lucas, a man who understood Lloyd better than almost anyone else in the world. Lucas had fought his own highly publicized battles with a destructive dependency, and had dedicated his life to helping other athletes find their way back. Television coverage at the time focused on this unique bond, noting that Lucas didn't just see a player, he saw a kindred spirit who needed a specific kind of structure to survive the pressure of the professional lifestyle. Under Lucas, Lloyd thrived in his role as a versatile scoring threat off the bench. According to official NBA statistics, he finished his rookie season averaging 9.1 points over 64 games, a stat line that most rookies would be proud of, let alone one with a bullet in his body. He had successfully navigated his first year in the league, but as the offseason approached, the safety of the team structure began to fade. Just as he established himself as a legitimate NBA rotation player, the summer brought rumors of missed practices and a terrifying resurgence of his old demons. The transition from the court to the offseason is often the most dangerous time for a player in recovery, and for Lloyd, the lack of a daily schedule proved to be a heavy burden. Whispers began to circulate through the league that his conditioning was slipping and that the stability he found under John Lucas was beginning to crumble. As some reports claimed, the old habits that had derailed his college career were starting to shadow him once again. According to basketball archives, Lloyd played 0 regular season games for San Antonio in the 1993-94 season, as the franchise slowly moved in a different direction. Reporters noted at the time that his disappearance from the rotation wasn't just about his health, it was about the trust that had been broken during the long months away from the team. By the time his contract expired, the San Antonio Spurs were no longer willing to gamble on his potential. He found himself back in the familiar, anxious position of a free agent with a reputation that scared off the major contenders. In a desperate attempt to stay in the league, he landed a tryout with the New York Knicks for their summer league squad, hoping for a homecoming that would fix everything. But the New York version of Lloyd Daniels was a shadow of the rookie who had captivated San Antonio just a year prior. He looked slow, out of rhythm, and burdened by the weight of a severe personal crisis that he couldn't quite shake. According to sports media reports, in the summer of 1994, he was cut from the Knicks roster before the regular season even began. Unemployed and seemingly out of chances, Daniels answered a frantic phone call from an injury-plagued team in Los Angeles that was willing to take one last look at the legend. If there was ever a place built for a comeback story as cinematic as Lloyd Daniels, it was the Forum in Los Angeles. By the mid-90s, the Lakers were a team in transition, looking for a spark, and the rumors about a streetball legend with a bullet in his chest had reached the West Coast. According to official NBA statistics, during the 1994 to 1995 season, Lloyd finally got the call to put on the purple and gold. He signed a 10-day contract, a move that reporters noted at the time was a low-risk, high-reward gamble for a franchise that always had a soft spot for a showman. On the court, the magic hadn't completely vanished. He was playing alongside young, hungry stars like Nick Van Exel and Eddie Jones, and there were nights when Swee Pea looked like he had never left the playgrounds of Queens. According to archived box scores, he managed to log a 20-plus point game in a Lakers uniform, proving that he could still fill it up when his rhythm was right. For those 25 games he spent in Los Angeles, he averaged 7.4 points per game, showing a veteran poise that seemed to suggest he might have finally found a permanent home. But the Hollywood bright lights had a way of exposing the things that a box score couldn't hide. While his shooting eye remained elite, the hard miles and the physical trauma of his past were catching up to him. He found himself struggling to keep up with the lightning-fast guards of the 90s, and his lack of lateral quickness made him a liability on the defensive end of the floor. The Hollywood comeback was a brilliant flash in the pan, but his body, battered by age, personal struggles, and a gunshot wound, began to visibly betray him during a late-season road trip. After the Lakers decided not to extend his stay, Lloyd Daniels entered the most grueling phase of a professional athlete's life, the nomadic existence of the fringe NBA player. He became a regular on the 10-day contract circuit, a world where you live out of a suitcase and every single missed jumper feels like a pink slip. According to NBA transaction archives, during the 1995 to 1996 season, he signed with the Philadelphia 76ers, appearing in exactly 5 games. That month, the press was writing about a man who seemed to be running out of time, a legend who was slowly becoming a footnote. The grind didn't stop in Philly. He bounced to the Sacramento Kings and the New Jersey Nets, trying to convince coaches that his basketball IQ was worth a roster spot even if his legs were heavy. According to official league archives, during his stints between 1996 and 1997, his playing time plummeted to under 10 minutes a game. In interviews, he said something close to the idea that he was just happy to still be in the room, but the reality was that he was fighting for survival in a league that was getting younger and more athletic by the minute. The physical decline was impossible to ignore. The explosive first step that made him a superstar in New York was gone, replaced by a cautious ground-bound game. He was no longer the centerpiece of a master plan, he was a specialist, brought in for a few minutes of veteran leadership and a couple of perimeter shots. Teams were no longer looking for the ghost of the New York streetball legend. They just needed a warm body to fill out the end of the bench before the 1997 trade deadline. The final stop on the NBA line for Lloyd Daniels was north of the border with a young expansion team called the Toronto Raptors. By the time he arrived in Canada, the story of Swee Pea had become a piece of league lore, a cautionary tale that the younger players had heard about but never fully witnessed. According to official NBA statistics, Lloyd appeared in his final professional games early in the 1997-98 season. Television coverage at the time focused on the veteran presence he brought to a struggling roster, but the writing was clearly on the wall. He wasn't there to save the franchise, he was there to fill a gap. In what would be his final act on the big stage, Lloyd played in 6 games for the Raptors, showing one last glimpse of the scoring touch that had defined his youth. According to Basketball Archives, he averaged 5.7 points in those final appearances, a quiet and sobering end to a career that was once predicted to be Hall of Fame caliber. There were no retirement tours or standing ovations, just a quiet realization that the speed of the game had finally surpassed what his battered body could offer. When the Raptors made the decision to move in a different direction and waived him, the realization hit home that the big league lights were going out for good. He had played exactly 200 regular season games in the NBA, a number that sounds small until you remember that a bullet was still lodged in his body for every single one of them. When the Raptors front office processed his final release papers in November of 1997, Lloyd was forced to face a reality he had been running from since he was a teenager: life without the shield of professional basketball. When the NBA dream finally went quiet in Toronto, many expected Lloyd Daniels to simply fade away or fall back into the gravity of the streets. But for a man who had survived bullets and the crack epidemic, the end of a contract wasn't the end of his life. Lloyd became a true basketball lifer, a ghost who haunted gyms from Puerto Rico to the CBA. According to international sports databases, Lloyd continued to play professional basketball into the mid-2000s, spanning 3 different decades and playing well into his late 30s. For him, the game wasn't about the fame or the millions anymore. It was the only place where the world finally made sense. Reporters noted at the time that while his knees were heavy and his jersey changed every few months, the genius of Swee Pea never truly left him. He became a traveling professor of the game, suiting up for over 15 different professional franchises worldwide, according to Player Archives. He played in the USBL, the CBA, and in small towns across Europe and South America, often for just enough money to keep moving. In interviews, he said something close to the idea that the basketball court was the only place he felt safe from the temptations that had almost ended him in New York. As the years ticked by, he began to transition from the man taking the shots to the man teaching them. He started coaching AAU teams and working with minor league programs, trying to use his own scars as a map for the next generation of New York City guards. He had survived crack cocaine, 3 bullets to the chest, and the brutal business of the NBA. But as he stepped away from the court for the last time, the ultimate question remained: how would history judge the man they called Swee Pea? Decades after he first stepped onto the asphalt in Queens, the legacy of Lloyd Daniels remains one of the most debated stories in the history of the game. In the barbershops of Harlem and the parks of Brooklyn, the what-if conversations still happen every Saturday morning. Was he really as good as Magic? Could he have been the greatest to ever do it if that night in Las Vegas had gone differently? In 2015, the release of the documentary The Legend of Swee Pea brought these questions back to the forefront, as major sports media reviews explored the thin line between his immense talent and his severe personal crises. Official league archives provide a sobering reality to the playground myths. He finished his NBA career with an average of 7.1 points per game.